My name is Catherine Yamamoto, and I'm a teacher at Riverside Secondary. One of the classes that I have is the Multicultural Leadership class. And this class puts on a number of cultural events throughout the year. And today we have our second storytelling event. This event is actually started out as a little idea that I had that many of the stories were common across all the cultures and languages. So, for example, there are many versions of the Cinderella story. And as I teach EAL classes to students from various countries, such as Russia or China or Korea, I ask them about fairy tales in their countries and whether they knew about Cinderella. And they all said, "Oh, sure, we know Cinderella." And I said, "Okay, well," and then when I started asking them about Cinderella, all the details were quite different and wonderful. So I thought, how wonderful to be able to tell such versions of the Cinderella story. And that's what got this whole thing started. This event tonight is hosted by my Multicultural Leadership group, but is actually a collaboration of many various departments in our school. For example, we have the senior concert band who has put some time into playing a few numbers for us. We have the foods classes who have made the delicious iced tea and cupcakes and cookies for us. We have the art department who students have lent us a couple of their paintings. We have members of the community who have come in to do artwork and share some of their art pieces. And actually one of my friends was listening to me describing our upcoming event with all of these various wonderful stories. And then she asked, well, are there illustrations to these storytelling things? And I said, well, we have PowerPoint pictures for a couple. And she says, well, would you like to have a painting? And so she went home and over this past weekend created 2 or 3 different paintings. So I was very grateful for that.
I would like to begin our program with some lovely stories from our Aboriginal Youth Leader Council. And they have 3 stories to share with us today. The first is the teachings of the killer whale, and then the teachings of the bear, and the story of the heron and the hummingbird.
Yeah, sure. All right, good evening. My name is Kyler Dickey, and tonight, as you said, I'm here to share with you some of the teachings of the button blanket. So a button blanket is a wool-based blanket created by the Northwest coastal peoples. It's not used for sleeping. The button blanket is worn like a cape and worn at ceremonies. A blanket contains a crest, an animal, or another natural object that tells a story or embodies the values and morals of the wearers. A young warrior would be gifted their blanket at their coming-of-age ceremony or as they complete their rites of passage. Our 2-department button blankets signify the values we convey into the larger community. The killer whale symbolizes kindness, intelligence, and compassion. They are known as the guardian of the sea and the guardian of travel, as well as a symbol for unity and goodness. And the bear represents family and strength, as well as possessing great self-awareness. The bear in the Northwest coastal culture represents strength. They learn humility through motherhood and are an important family crest associated with family and children. The button blanket is an art form, but also a form of storytelling, as we learn so much about the people and their values viewing these blankets. We will share one story, that of the heron and the hummingbird, read by my fellow Aboriginal Youth Council member, Troy Brown.
Heron and hummingbird were very good friends, even though one was tall and gangly and awkward, and one was small and sleek and fast. They both loved to eat fish. The hummingbird preferred small fish like minnows, and the heron liked the large ones. One day, Hummingbird said to his friend, "I'm not sure there's enough fish in the world for the both of us. Why don't we have a race to see which of us should own all the fish?" Heron thought this was a very good idea. They decided that they would race for 4 days. The finish line was an old dead tree next to a faraway river. Whichever of them sat on top of the tree first on the 4th day of the race would own all the fish in the world. They started out the next morning. The hummingbird zipped along, flying around and around the heron, who was moving steadily forward, flapping his giant wings. The head hummingbird would be distracted by pretty flowers along the way. He would flit from one to another, tasting the nectar. When Hummingbird noticed that Heron was in front of him, he hurried to catch up to him, zooming as fast as he could, leaving Heron far behind. Heron just kept flying steadily forward, flapping his giant wings. Hummingbird was tired from all his flitting. When it got dark, he decided to rest. He found a nice spot to perch and slept all night long. But Heron just kept flying steadily forward all night long, flapping his giant wings. When Hummingbird woke the next morning, Heron was far ahead. Hummingbird had to fly as fast as he could to catch up. He zoomed past the big, awkward heron and kept going until Heron had disappeared behind him. Then the hummingbird noticed some pretty flowers nearby. He zipped over to them and tasted their nectar. He was enjoying the pretty scenery and didn't notice Heron flapping his giant wings when he passed him. Hummingbird finally remembered that he was racing with Heron and flew as fast as he could to catch up with the big, awkward bird. Then he zipped along, flying around and around the heron, who kept moving steadily forward, flapping his giant wings. For 2 more days, the hummingbird and heron raced toward the far-distant riverbank with the dead tree as the finish line. Hummingbird had a marvelous time sipping nectar and flitting among the flowers and resting himself at night. Heron stoically kept up a steady flap, flap, flapping his giant wings, propelling himself through the air all day and all night. Hummingbird woke from his sleep the morning of the 4th day, refreshed and invigorated. He flew zip, zip toward the riverbank with his dead tree. When it came to view, he saw Heron perched on the top of the tree. Heron had won the race by flying straight through and steady through the night, while Hummingbird slept. So from that day forward, Heron owned all the fish in the rivers and the lakes, and the hummingbird had sipped from the nectar of the so many flowers which he enjoyed during the race.
Right now, our senior concert band has given us a little bit of their time, and they're joining us to play a little musical interlude, and it's called Bugs.
We chose to do this song because it doesn't tell a story specifically, but it illustrates 4 different characters, 4 different types of insects, and it's a great example of what music can do without words. And music is often very important culturally. It's a great opportunity for the intersection of cultures. So this is just my little spiel, and thank you for coming.
story is a Cinderella story. So it might not be the one that you might know. It's the Algonquin Cinderella, and will be narrated by Mr. Felix Thiessen, who was actually a former colleague. He retired from Riverside a few years ago, and now comes back to enjoy, just to enjoy.
Yeah, you no doubt all very familiar with the Cinderella tale that we all know well. This is a very different one. Cinderella stories have been around in the world for many centuries. As a matter of fact, there are some people who say that the oldest version is thousands of years old and hails from Vietnam. They're all a little bit different. This one comes from eastern Canada, from the Algonquin Nation. In this tale, it's hundreds of years old, this one, okay? And in this tale, you won't find any of the usual elements. No pumpkin coach or fairy godmother, a ball in the arms of a handsome prince. Alas, all missing. Glass slipper, not there. Not even a wicked stepmother. So instead, however, we find other wonders which will cast an interesting light on the story that you're all familiar with. And yeah, I'd like to quote here the saying by the great thinker Joseph Campbell, who said that fairy tales are the picture language of the soul. So I call this tale Little Scarface, after the nickname that the Algonquin people gave to our Algonquin heroine, Cinderella. So here it is. There was once a large village of the Mi'kmaq nations of the Algonquin nation, built beside a lake. At the far end of the village stood a lodge all by itself, and in it lived a young, handsome shaman, who was always invisible, and what he wore or carried likewise. He lived there with his sister, who looked after him. Now, she could easily see him, plain as day, but to other people, and to the animals that he hunted, he was like the wind in the trees, or the rustling of leaves, perhaps sensed, but never seen. Now he was ready to marry, and he let it be known through his sister that he would marry any girl who could see him. Many girls had already tried, but failed the test. Now, this is the way in which the test of sight was carried out. At evening time, when the invisible one was due to come home, his sister would walk with any girl who might come down to the side of the lake. As soon as she saw her brother approaching, she would say to the girl, "Do you see my brother?" "Yes," they would generally reply, though some of them did say no. To those who said that they could indeed see him, the sister would then say, "Of what is his shoulder strap made?" Or, "With what is he pulling his sled?" Or, "What is his bowstring?" And they would answer, "A strip of rawhide," or "a green withe, a flexible branch," or something of that kind. Then she, knowing that they had not told the truth, would say, "Very well, let us return to the lodge." When they had gone in, she would tell them not to sit in a certain place because it belonged to the invisible one. Then, after they had helped her to cook supper, they would wait with great curiosity to see him eat. When he took off his moccasins, they could be sure that he was a real person, because as soon as he'd taken them off, they became visible, and his sister picked them up and hung them beside the entrance on a peg. But beyond this, they saw nothing of him, even though they stayed all night in the lodge, as many of them did. Now, there lived in the village an old man, a widower, who had 3 daughters. The youngest girl was very small, very weak, and often very ill. And yet her sisters, especially the elder, treated her very cruelly. The second daughter was somewhat kinder and sometimes even took her side. But the wicked sister would burn her hands and feet with hot cinders until she was covered with scars from this treatment. Even her face was covered in burns and scars, as many as holes in a sieve. From this came her name, and people called her Uchikish, the rough-faced girl, or Scarface. When her father came home and asked why she had such terrible burns, the bad sister would at once say that it was her own fault, for she had disobeyed orders and gone near the fire and fallen into it. Now one day, these two elder sisters decided they too would try for the young shaman's hand. The elder began, "Now it's my turn. I am sure I shall be able to see him." "Pah!" sniffed the middle sister. "You? Indeed? I'm just as likely to see him as you are, and why should you go first, anyway?" "Well, I'm the eldest." "Oh, he's sure to want a younger woman." They glared at each other till the middle sister added, "Don't think I'll let you go alone." At last the elder agreed. "Very well, we'll go together then." So they dressed themselves in their finest clothes and tried to look their prettiest. They found the invisible one's sister by the lake and took the usual walk by the water. When he came, and when they were asked if they could see him, they answered, "Of course." And when asked about the shoulder strap or sled cord, they answered, "A piece of rawhide." But of course they were lying like the others, and they got nothing for their pains. The next afternoon, little Scarface, who had always gone barefoot, brought a pair of her father's moccasins, old ones, and put them into water to soften them so she could wear them. Now, with no other clothes than her usual rags, the poor little girl went into the woods and got herself some sheets of birch bark, from which she made a dress and put marks on it for decoration in the old traditional style of the Algonquin nation. She made a petticoat and a loose gown, a cap, leggings, and even a handkerchief, all of birch bark. She put on her father's large old moccasins, which were far too big for her, and went forth to try her luck. She would try, she thought, to see if she might be able to see the invisible one. She did not begin very well. As she set off to the far end of the village, her sisters shouted and hooted. They hissed and they yelled, and they tried to stop her. "Where are you going in that ridiculous outfit?" sneered the elder sister. Little Scarface mumbled, to see the invisible one. "What? Foolish girl, come back!" and so on, but they couldn't stop her. The loafers in the village were just as bad, heckling her as she went. "Shame! Ugly creature! See how her hair sticks out. Why is she wearing birch bark anyway? Where do you think you're going?" But she ignored all their jeering. Now, the poor little girl in her birch bark clothes with her face all scarred was an awful sight. Nevertheless, she was kindly received by the sister of the invisible one. And this was, of course, because this noble lady understood far more about things than simply the mere outside, which all the rest of the world knows. As the brown of the evening sky turned to black, the lady took her down to the water. "Do you see him?" the invisible one's sister asked. At first, all she could see was an empty canoe approaching, invisible paddles dipping in the lake. "Oh, yes, I see him," the sister asked. "And what is his shoulder strap made of?" Little Scarface said, "It's the rainbow." "And, my sister, What is his bowstring? It's the Milky Way. Ah, so you have seen him. She took the girl home with her and bathed her. And as she did so, all the scars disappeared from her body and from her face. She even seemed to grow taller. And her hair grew long again from under the comb, long and shining like a black bird's wing. Her eyes were now like stars. In all the world there was no other such beauty. Then from her treasure the lady gave her a wedding dress and adorned her. Then she led her to the wife's seat in the lodge, the one next to where the invisible one sat beside the entrance. And just then he came in, terrible and beautiful. He smiled and said, "So, we've been found out." "Yes," said his sister. And turning now to Scarface, he smiled again. "At last, I've found you, my lovely bride." And that is how little Scarface became the bride of the invisible one.
Well, this next story is about an enormous turnip. And we might need some people to help us pull it out of the ground.
The enormous turnip.
البستان العجيب.
大きな株
Once upon a time, an old man planted a little turnip. Grow, grow, little turnip. Grow sweet, he said. Grow, grow, little turnip. Grow strong. And the turnip grew up sweet and strong and enormous. Then, one day, the old man tried to pull the turnip up. He pulled and he pulled again, but he could not pull it up.
يشد ويشد لكنه لا يستطيع أن يقتلع اللفتة العجيبة.
うんとこしょどっこいしょところが株は抜けません
So the old woman called her grandson. So the grandson called the granddaughter. The granddaughter pulled the grandson. The grandson pulled the old woman. The old woman pulled the old man. And the old man pulled the turnip. They pulled and they pulled again, but still they could not pull it up.
البنت تشد الولد والولد يشد المرأة العجوزة والمرأة العجوز تشد الرجل العجوز والرجل العجوز يشد اللفتة يشدون ويشدون لكنهم لا يستطيعون أن يقتلعوا اللفتة العجيبة.
孫娘が孫を引っ張って孫がおばあさんを引っ張っておばあさんがおじいさんを引っ張っておじいさんが株を引っ張ってうんとっこしょどっこいしょまだまだ株は抜けません
So the granddaughter called the black dog. The black dog pulled the granddaughter. The granddaughter pulled the grandson. The grandson pulled the old woman. The old woman pulled the old man. And the old man pulled the turnip. They pulled and they pulled again, but still they could not pull it up.
الكلب يشد البنت والبنت تشد الولد والولد يشد المرأة العجوزة والمرأة العجوز تشد الرجل العجوز والرجل العجوز يشد اللفتة يشدون ويشدون لكنهم لا يستطيعون أن يقتلعوا اللفتة العجيبة.
犬が孫娘を引っ張って孫娘が孫を引っ張って孫がおばあさんを引っ張っておばあさんがおじいさんを引っ張っておじいさんが株を引っ張ってうんどっこしょどっこいしょまだまだまだまだ株は抜けません
So the black dog called the cat. The cat pulled the black dog. The black dog pulled the granddaughter. The granddaughter pulled the grandson. The grandson pulled the old woman. The old woman pulled the old man. And the old man pulled the turnip. They pulled and they pulled again, but still they could not pull it up.
القطة تشد الكلب والكلب يشد البنت والبنت تشد الولد والولد يشد المرأة العجوزة والمرأة العجوز تشد الرجل العجوز والرجل العجوز يشد اللفتة يشدون ويشدون لكنهم لا يستطيعون أن يقتلعوا اللفتة العجيبة.
猫が犬を引っ張って犬 犬が孫娘を引っ張って、孫娘が孫を引っ張って、孫がおばあさんを引っ張って、おばあさんがおじいさんを引っ張って、おじいさんが株を引っ張って、どっこしょ、どっこいしょ。それでも株は抜けません。
So the cat called the mouse. The mouse pulled the cat. The cat pulled the black dog. The black dog pulled the granddaughter. The granddaughter pulled the grandson. The grandson pulled the old woman. The old woman pulled the old man. The old man pulled the turnip. And up came the enormous turnip at last.
This story may be familiar to some, but for those, I'll give you a little bit of background. This poem is truly Canadian, and it's set in the Yukon, up in the north. The poet and illustrator were actually originally from England, so it's not truly Canadian, maybe. Both roamed the world, and both were caught up in what the poet, Robert Service, called the spell of the Yukon. Having traveled there, I can attest to that, and there definitely is a spell there. No one has captured that spell in words better than Robert Service, and no painter has captured the particular essence of the Yukon experience much better than Ted Harrison. In their work, both men caught the color, imagery, and passion of the land. Sam McGee, who the story is about, was a real person. I have no idea what he would be like, but it's certainly, well, you'll see in the story. And the poem is authentic Yukon. The Yukon continues to weave its spell, so welcome to the world of Robert Service and Ted Harrison in The Cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The Northern Lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Lavage. I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way, he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold. Through the parka's fold it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd closed, then the lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our holes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed and the stars overhead were dancing heel and toe, he turned to me and, Cap, says he, I'll cash in on this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking, that you won't refuse my last request. Well, he seemed so low that I couldn't say no. Then he says with a sort of a moan, it's the cursed cold and it's got right hold till I'm chilled clean through to the bone. Yet, 'tain't being dead, it's my awful dread of the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that foul or fair, you'll cremate my last remains. Well, a pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail. And we started on at the streak of dawn. God, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee. And before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried, horror-driven, with a corpse
half hid, but I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, you may tax your brawn and reins, but you promise true, and it's up to you to cremate those last remains. Now, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were dumb, in my heart, how I cursed that load. In the long, long night by the lone firelight, while the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows. Oh God, how I loathed the thing. And every day that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow, and on I went, though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I'd often sing to that hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin. Till I came to the marge of Lake Lavage, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw in a trice it was called the Alice May. And I looked at it, and I thought of it, and I looked at my frozen chum. Then, here, said I with a sudden cry, is my crêpe-matot real. Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was lying around, and I heaped the fire higher. The flames just soared, and the furnace roared, such a blaze you seldom see. And I burrowed a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed it, Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. And the heavens scowled, and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. And the greasy smoke in an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear, but the stars came out and they danced about ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, I'll just take a peek inside. I guess he's cooked, and it's time I looked. And the door I opened wide. And there sat Sam, looking cool and calm in the heat of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile you could see a mile, and he said, please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you'll let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plumtree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen strange sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake Lavage, I cremated Sam McGee.
Our next number is a little different. We have a group of students who have competed in the district spoken word poetry contest.
这个节目是诗歌朗诵。
And tonight we have two members, Andy Wu and Megan Hans, who will share a poem that they have composed themselves, and then they will...
All right, so this is a different type of performance. We're going to do 3 poems, two individuals, one group one that we'll do together. And if you hear anything nice while we're presenting, don't be afraid to snap, because that's what we do in song poetry. All right, let's get it started, everyone. Snap! Good, good. All right, you got it flowing, All right. All right, I'll start first with my sample. From the moment I met you, I knew you were forever a part of my life. You were hard and brittle at first, like how tree trunks are intertwined with the earth. Tough as nails you were, it was impossible to interact with you. But when you grew with fever, you released a scheme that pushed me back so far to the edge of the world I nearly fell. But when you were ready to welcome me back into your embrace, you allowed me to place you in my platter of love and prosperity. It was like welcoming the devil to the gates of heaven. Although you weren't as hot as the devil, nevertheless you're seductive to my sins. My five senses were hypnotized and allured by your complexion, because you smelled like the scentless smell of dreary dreams. And if you only speak with a voice, the kawaii inside me would have died. Our paths and fates are overlapping with an infinite series of hellos and goodbyes. You somehow appear into my life like how a magician pulls a penny from my ear. Some say you weren't even worth a penny, but to me, you're priceless. To me, you're a perfect jewel with a unique shape and value. But sadly, everybody looks down upon you as if you were poor nobility. So you aren't a princess, yet you change your clothes and people will mistaking you for a jasmine. You don't live in castles, but instead live in the loose lakes of sacred soil. Royalties and fame are less than a fraction of a second to you. But still, you don't have the time in the world to spend with an alluring, charming guy like me. But deep down inside this bottle of broken heart, you reside my residence, because heart is where the home is, and you, darling, are always welcome. You're the antidepressant in the state of my immature adolescence. The only one that can save me from my after-school stress syndrome was you. A cure to cancer, catalytic chemicals, and a curve to calculus cannot compare to the chemistry that causes my craving for you. Unlike other girls, you always enjoy staying by my side, even if the gods are watching, so thank you. Thank you for keeping my ego awake and alive. Thank you for showing me that the smallest sparks can make the most of a starry sky. Thank you for showing me simpleness, yet abundant quantities cannot compare to the others, where death would have come knocking on my dinner table. I know I can always say these three words. I'm still hungry. Thank you, rice.
And this is the poem I wrote called Climbing Trees. I don't remember the first time I looked at a tree and decided to try and climb it, or the first time I fell out of one. But I know I love being above in those branches. The air's sharper up there somehow, fresher, greener. I like looking at the world from up here. It's not quite real. People wander around like insects. The crickets are musical, the butterflies beautiful, and everyone's so dutiful. I'm different here, detached. And so long as I keep my eyes on that distant-looking horizon, it's bliss. But don't look down. Don't look down. I don't remember the first time I fell, but I know I can't fly. So I feel the crispness, the greenness of sky in my lungs, but clutch my perch like a lifeline. Some call it a fear of heights, but it isn't. It's a fear of falling. The higher I go, the more I hear, but the less I'm disturbed. The cranking, creaking, crunching, cars and clanking construction, the cacophony of man's conceited, unneeded creations can't find me up here. It's serene, solitary. In this sprout that miraculously stands skyward, to breathe is sweeter, the sounds are softer, but significant. Somehow something more than themselves. The lilt of birdsong lulls me, lyrical and lowly. It leads me through veils of branches and leaves before I hear the sounds of feathered flight. And I wish I could follow it, feel its song forever, but it's flown away, and I'd only fall. So here I stay. Don't look down. Don't look down. I don't remember the first time I rode a two-wheeled bike by myself, but I wasn't afraid of falling then. There was a chill, though, and the air was a little less green. The higher I go, the more I hear, and I listen as a squirrel chatters nearby. I've never heard one so close. It's meaningless and innocent, and something in that is magnificent, and I'm curious and ignorant, and this tree seems infinite, so I seek out the sound. It takes a minute before I realize it's climbed back down, chattering on its way. And I wish I could follow it, but I'm a long way up, and it's a short way down. Don't look down. Don't look down. I don't remember the first time my mom swore in front of me and didn't mind me hearing, but I treaded carefully after that, because by then I knew I couldn't fly, and I wasn't used to cursing if I fell. The air wasn't green anymore. Leaves fluttered around me like words once forbidden, and a branch cracked under my weight. I know I can't stay in this tree forever, and sooner or later gravity will pull me back to earth, and I'll enter the world, the real world, and never again be something more than what I am. What goes up must come down, and I'll either go gracefully or I'll fall. But if I cling to this branch and keep my eyes closed, gravity may look away. If I can't see it, it can't see me, so don't look down. Don't look down. I don't remember the first time I looked at a tree and didn't wonder if I could climb it.
In the realm of natural numbers, there lay love tale of 1 and 2.
They had a bittersweet relationship because everybody knew.
First the worst, second the best. One fought alone, he was a factor in everybody's life, only had himself.
2 had twice of what 1 had. 2 was balanced.
They lived beside each other on the beginning of the block. 1 and 2 occasionally talked, while 1 was awkward and odd. Because he saw 4, 9, 16, and 2, which are all perfect squares.
But 2 saw 1 as pi, an irrational fellow. 2 couldn't understand how 1 could be so mellow.
1 had a one-track mind. 1 thought of all the fantasies of being with 2, but in the end, it was all just a pile of square root of -1. Imaginary.
Imagine that. Unrequited numerical love.
Sadly, 1's heart shrunk as 2 was claimed by 7. After all, 2 loved 7's luck and wealth, with them add together 1 step closer to 69.
But the coupling was unstable. Their fate was primed for failure.
They divided their time together, and their love only lasted a fraction of a second.
7 was a jerk. He picked on 1 because when 7 saw 1, he became 8. And when 8 flipped, there would be an
Infinite amount of hate and despise, because 8 couldn't stand 2, because half of 2's life was always part of 1.
1 found 2 crying on a summertime evening of how she found out the addition lurking beneath 7.
1 wanted to help but felt powerless because he knew no matter what he said, 1 to the power of anything is 1.
1 felt hopeless, but he remembered that small things can make great change. Remember that his cousin 0 became a hero.
Because 0 didn't add any obstacles into his life, but instead overcame with truth and courage. The obstacles became nothing, but 1 was not like 0. He was the game changer.
1 point could mean win or lose, and he looked at 2. He wanted her to win.
He held out 1 hand and said, no matter normal or reciprocals, negatives or positives, evens or odds, you can take my hand and we can become 3.
2 was surprised, but more than anything, she was lukewarm happy. A burst of laughter came from the duo.
1 blushed cherry red as he held out his hand, then 2 giggled and placed both her hands into 1's. Their newfound attraction was better than the top 3.
Their relationship was hotter than a triangle's 180 degrees. In the realm of natural numbers, there lay a love tale of 1 and 2, but this time,
first the worst plus
second the best
equals 3rd times the charm.
We have another break, intermission with the music. Concert band who will play the second part of Buds.
下一个节目是音乐表演虫的第2部分。
And following this intermission, we only have 2 more stories, and then we'll break out the iced tea. So hold on to your seats, please.
Our next number is truly a beautiful piece, narrated by my good friend and our librarian, Sue Kilpatrick. And she has always loved Japan, the Japanese culture, and in particular kimonos. And she likes to buy them and she collects them on her travels. And today she's sharing a story about a kimono, and she's also showing us her kimono, and also helped out by the drama troupe.
下一个故事是舒淇的和服。
This is a story titled Suki's Kimono by Sherry Funagaki, and it's a story about staying true to yourself. On the first day of school, Suki wanted to wear her kimono. Her sisters did not approve. "You can't wear that," said Mari. "People will think you're weird." "You can't wear that," said Yumi. "Everyone will laugh and no one will play with you." "You need something new, Suki. You need something cool." But Suki shook her head. She didn't care for new and she didn't care for cool. She wanted to wear her favorite thing, and her favorite thing was her kimono. Suki's Oba-chan had given her the kimono. The first time Suki wore it, her Oba-chan, grandmother, took her to a street festival where they slurped bowls of slippery cold somen noodles and shared a cone of crunchy shaved ice topped with a sweet red bean sauce. Under strings of paper lanterns, Suki joined her Oba-chan in a circle dance. She followed her and copied her movements, trying to be as light and as graceful. She watched the other men, women, and children who danced, especially those who were dressed in kimono like her. Later, Suki sat so close to the stage that when the taiko drummers performed "Bom Bom, Bom Bom," she felt like she'd swallowed a ball of thunder and her whole insides quaked and quivered. Before they left the festival, Suki and her Oba-chan stopped at a souvenir stand. There were many things to choose from, but her Oba-chan found the prettiest thing of all, a handkerchief of pale pink and blue linen decorated with maple leaves and cherry blossoms. When she gave it to Suki, she said, "This will help you remember our day." Now it was time for school. Mother checked Suki's obi one last time and took a picture of Mari, Yumi, and Suki together by the front steps. Then, as she watched, the three sisters made their way down the block to their school. Mari and Yumi stayed several paces ahead of Suki and pretended they didn't know her. But Suki didn't mind. She turned and waved to her mother before she clip-clopped along in her shiny red geita, her shoes, feeling very pleased in her fan-patterned kimono. Once in a while, Suki would lift her arms and let the butterfly sleeves flutter in the breeze. Made her feel like she'd grown her own set of wings. When they reached the school, Mari and Yumi hurried across the yard to a group of their friends. Suki stopped and looked around. Some of the children turned and stared at her, and others giggled and pointed at her kimono. But Suki ignored them. She took a seat on a swing to wait for the bell, and a girl, dressed in overalls like a pair Suki had at home, sat in the swing beside her. "Hi, Suki," said the girl. "Hi, Penny," said Suki. "How come you're dressed so funny?" Penny asked. "Where'd you get those shoes?" Suki lifted her feet off the sand and wiggled her toes. "I'm not dressed funny," she said. "My grandma gave me these shoes." Suki started pumping her legs, and after a moment, Penny did the same, and soon they were both swinging as fast and as high as they could. Swoosh, swoosh, up and up. When the bell rang, Suki and Penny jumped off their swings and ran to the gym for the first day assembly. Once they were finally taken to their new classroom, Suki chose a desk near the window, and Penny chose a desk next to Suki. As they waited for everyone to find a seat, two boys in front of Suki turned and snickered behind their hands. One of the boys reached over and snatched at Suki's sleeve. "Look at this," he said. "She's a bat." Suki felt her cheeks burn, but she did not respond. Instead, she concentrated on sitting up straight and tall, the way her Oba-chan always did. It was easy to do with an obi wrapped snug around her middle. Her obi was yellow, and in its folds, Suki had tucked away her handkerchief. "Welcome to the first grade," said the teacher. "My name's Mrs. Paggio." She smiled. "Let's introduce ourselves and tell everyone what we did this summer." "My grandma visited us," Suki said, straightening her sleeves. "She brought me my kimono and my geta." Suki raised her foot to show the teacher her wooden clock. Somewhere in the classroom, someone laughed. But Suki took a deep breath and continued. "The best thing was that she took me to a festival, and there were dancing people dressed like me, and they danced like this." She took a few steps and swayed her arms sideways. She hummed the music she remembered hearing at the festival, and she remembered how it felt to dance barefoot in the air. She tried to picture the other dancers, how they moved forward in the circle, how the rhythm of the music made them sway from side to side, how they moved their arms, first right, then left, and up, and then down. When Suki couldn't remember the next move, she made it up just to keep dancing. 1, 2, 1, 2. When she finished, the room seemed very quiet. Everyone was watching her. Suki sat down, wondering if she was in trouble. But Mrs. Paggio said, "That was wonderful, Suki." And she started to clap. And then so did Penny. And after a moment, so did the entire class. And after school, as the three sisters walked home together, Mari and Yumi grumbled about their first day. "No one even noticed my new sweater," said Mari. "And no one even noticed my cool shoes," said Yumi. Suki just smiled, and as she clip-clopped along behind them, she pulled out the pale pink handkerchief from her obi and held it up over her head to catch the wind. And in her cotton kimono and her shiny red shoes, Suki danced all the way home.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Kilpatrick. That was beautiful. Our final story tonight is an African tale. It's called The Name of the Tree.
最后一个故事是非洲的故事，名叫树的名字。
The name of the tree. Once, long ago, in the land of short grass, there was a great hunger. No rain fell and no grass grew, and all the animals were hungry. They searched in the jungle, they searched by the river, they searched on the great flat plain, but they could find nothing to eat. All the animals gathered together, and they said, "Let us go together across the great flat plain until we come to something we can eat." And so all the animals, except for the lion, who was king and lived in the jungle, walked across a flat, empty land. They walked, and after many days they saw a small bump on the edge of the flat land. Then they saw that this small bump was a tree, and the tree was very tall, and the tree had fruit on it.
such fruit as they had never seen before. It was as red as pomegranates, as yellow as bananas, as green as melons, as purple as plums, and as orange as mangoes. And it smelled like all the fruits of the world. But the tree was so tall, and the branches so high, that even the giraffe couldn't reach the fruit. And the trunk was so smooth that even the monkey couldn't climb the tree. At last, when they were too tired to cry any longer, a very old tortoise spoke. "Oh, animals," she said, "my great-great-great-great-grandmother told me a story about a wonderful tree. The fruit of the tree was so delicious and good to eat, but it could be reached only by those who knew the name of the tree." The animals cried out, "But who can tell us the name of the tree?" The very old tortoise answered, "The king knows. We must send someone to ask him." "I will go," said the zebra. "I am the fastest runner of us all." And that was true. So the gazelle started out across the great flat plain. He thought, "How lucky the animals are that I am willing to run." Indeed, it was not long before the gazelle reached the jungle, and just by the river where the king lived. The king was sitting with his tail neatly wrapped around him. Every hair in his golden coat lay smooth and shiny. He spoke kindly to the zebra. "What do you wish of me?" he said. "Oh, great king," said the gazelle, "all the animals are hungry, and we have found a tree filled with wonderful fruit. But we cannot eat the fruit until we know the name of the tree." "I will tell you," said the lion, "but you must remember, for I don't want to have to tell anyone else. The name of the tree is Ungali." "Ungali?" said the gazelle. "I will run as fast as the wind, and I will reach the tree before I can possibly forget." The gazelle thanked the king and began to run through the jungle and across the great flat plain. He thought about how happy all the animals would be, and how they would thank him and be grateful to him. He thought about this so hard that he did not even see the rabbit hole that lay in his path, not far from where the animals were waiting. He stepped on it and went head over hoops and head over hoops. He landed in a great heap at the foot of the tree. "What is the name of the tree?" shouted the animal. But the zebra shook his head. He shook it again, but the name was gone. "I can't remember," he whispered. The animals groaned. "We will have to send someone else, someone who will not forget." "I will go," said the elephant. "I never forget anything." The animals nodded, for this was true, and so the elephant strode off across the great plain. "I will not forget," said the elephant. "I can remember anything I choose to, even the names of all my cousins," because the elephant had hundreds of cousins, "or the names of all the stars in the sky."
When the elephant arrived at the edge of the river, the king was sitting in his usual place, but the end of his tail was twitching and his fur was ruffled. "What do you want?" he growled. "O king," said the elephant, "all the animals are hungry." "I know," said the lion, "and you want to know the name of the tree with the wonderful fruit? I will tell you, but don't you forget, because I absolutely will not tell anyone else. The name of the tree is Ungali." "I will not forget," said the elephant. "I never forget anything," as she turned and began to make her way out of the jungle. "Forget," she grumbled to herself. "Me forget? Why, I can remember the names of all the trees in this jungle." As she began to name them. When she had finished the jungle trees, she went on to all the other trees in Africa. She was just starting on the trees of the rest of the world when she happened to step in the very rabbit hole that had tripped the gazelle. Her foot fitted exactly into the hole, so exactly she couldn't get it out. The animals waiting under the tree saw the elephant and ran toward her, calling, "What is the name of the tree?" The elephant pulled and tugged and pulled and tugged, and at last, with a great pop, her foot came out of the hole. "I can't remember," she said crossly. "I don't care. That tree has caused far too much trouble already." The animals didn't even groan. They were too tired and too hungry. After a very long time, a very young tortoise spoke. "Oh, animals," he said, "I will go and find out the name of the tree." "You?" said the animals, "but you're so young, and you're so small, and you're so slow." "Yes," said the very young tortoise, "but I know how to remember. I learned from my great-great-great-grandmother, the one who told you about the tree." The animals had nothing to say, and the little tortoise was already on his way. It is true that he was slow, but by putting one short leg ahead of the other, he crossed the great flat plain, went through the jungle, and arrived at the place by the river where the king lived.
The king was not sitting in his usual place. He was pacing up and down the bank of the river, waving his tail. His fur was standing on end. When he saw the very young tortoise, he roared, "If you have come to ask me the name of the tree, go home. I have told the gazelle, and I have told the elephant, and I will not tell you that the name of the tree is Ingali." The very young tortoise nodded his head politely. He turned and began to walk out of the jungle. As he walked, he said, "Ingali, Ingali, the name of the tree is Ingali. Ingali, Ingali, the name of the tree is Ingali." And he went on saying it as he crossed the great flat plain. "Ingali, Ingali, the name of the tree is Ingali." And he never stopped saying it, even when he got tired, even when he got thirsty, because that is what his great-great-great-grandmother had told him to do. Even when he fell right to the bottom of that same rabbit hole, the very young tortoise just climbed out of the tree, just climbed out saying, "Ingali, Ingali, the name of the tree is Ingali." None of the animals saw him coming. They were sitting under the tree, looking at the ground. The very young tortoise walked straight up to the foot of the tree and said in a loud voice, "The name of the tree is Ingali." The animals looked up. They saw the branches of the tree bend down so low that they could reach the wonderful fruit that was as red as pomegranates, as yellow as bananas, as green as melons, as purple as plums, and as orange as mangoes, and smelled like all the fruits of the world. The animals ate. They ate until they could eat no more, and then they lifted the very young tortoise high into the air and marched around the tree chanting, "Ingali, Ingali, the name of the tree is Ingali, 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 the name of the tree is Ingali," because they did not want to forget, and they never did. The end.